Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman's friend is here to give George's side of the story. But, Joe, I guess our people contacted you, and I personally am not as interested in Mr. Zimmerman's side of the story as your own personal experience with having been profiled. Have you ever gone out at night and felt as though you were treated differently just because of the color of your skin?
Oh, numerous times in my life. I mean, it started when I was a kid, when I first realized what prejudice was.
And Joe, I have to tell you that, you know, I've got tons of, it makes me really sad to hear that. I've got lots of friends and colleagues, and, you know, they've always said there was something going on. I kind of dismissed it. And it seems to be something that operates on a very deep and almost unconscious level. Even people that think they're not racist. You, Joe, who's a professional man, who should have to go out and somebody looks at you funny in a Starbucks just because you're wearing a hoodie. Isn't it important that we keep this conversation alive? Isn't that really what this is about tonight?
Well, that's why I stepped up, Dr. Drew. I mean, yeah, George Zimmerman is one of the finest men I've ever met in my life. And especially after talking to him, I know that there was going to be a death that night. It was going to be either Trayvon or George. And the reason why I stepped up is because I am uniquely qualified to step up for him, not just because I know him and respect him as a human being, but also because I am a black man, and I've grown up with the hatred and prejudice that everybody is protesting about. I've gone on record in saying if I didn't know George Zimmerman, I'd be out there with them, because not only have I experienced everything. Can I finish, please?
I'm with you, Joe.
Not only have
please, go ahead.
Not only have I experienced it, what people are protesting about and are outraged about, I've covered stories involving the Sanford Police Department and their racial activities.
So can we let the justice system kind of play out Mr. Zimmerman's story, and hopefully justice will prevail? But shouldn't we keep this conversation really alive? I mean, we do without vilifying anybody. We have to keep this conversation alive. Would you agree with me?
Again, that is my motivation. I'm uniquely qualified to be in this position. I didn't ask to be in this position other than when I realized I had a personal stake in it, not just because of my relationship with George, but because I'm an African-American male. I love this country. My father served this country. My uncle died for this country, okay? So it's vitally important to me that once this is done, that we keep this conversation going so we can eliminate the root cause of it all, which is fear.
Well, so Joe, because you're that guy, and I do appreciate you're sharing this phone call with us tonight, what do we do? I mean, let's again, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a legal expert. I'm hoping the system will play out and justice will prevail. What do we do? What do we do to keep this alive?
If I knew what we do, you know, I would think that I would have made a suggestion beforehand. But I think everybody realized that this stereotype that people are claiming is what motivated George in the first place is the stereotype that's been built upon over years and years and years, particularly in the media. It started in our literature before we had electronic media. It started with how African Americans were treated in the 50s, 60s, colored bathrooms. As a child, I could take swimming lessons in the city pool with other white children, but I could not swim during the open swim because I'm a black child. Those are the things that we've ingrained in our country, and we've got to find a way to remove it.
But Joe, I mean, you're really talking about I think everyone would agree, a sick level of racism. What I think we're trying to combat now is what some people call unconscious racism, which is literally guys like me who thought they weren't racist because of this story realized, oh my God, yeah, if a scary guy came up to me in a hoodie, I'd have a little reaction, and maybe that reaction would evoke hostility from that guy. And that's the subtle consciousness raising we're trying to create here, I think. I just think that's the nature
totally.
of this.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Where do you think, or what is the basis of that fear? What is it that put that thought in your psyche when in your heart you don't believe you're a racist? It's the constant exposure of African-American males as being aggressive. And yes, there is a large segment out there that has rightfully earned that reputation. But unfortunately, it is reflected upon the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of African American males out there who are out there every day working hard if they have a job to put their family, keep their family safe and healthy, and it's easy to say, it's all the media's fault. Well, the media is just part of it because we have to turn it on and buy into it first and foremost. Okay, so if we need to change this conversation, not just about the fear, but we have to change the conversation so we can have an understanding as human beings, regardless of our color.
That's right. I think it is about because the point you're making, Joe, is that the residual is left on me from images, even though I didn't know it was. And that
exactly.
and that people keep talking about. I think it's about. I really call this consciousness raising. I think that's what we're trying to ask for here as a country. And Joe, I know you're there supporting your friend. I don't know what happened that night, but help us. Help me keep this from becoming divisive. I want to make sure that we all stay, together in this conversation. We don't let it rip us all apart. So I really appreciate you coming in. I appreciate.
I understand that, and that's the other reason why I've put myself out there, because I love this country. I love this country. I love what it's done for me and my family, and I understand how this is ripping it apart. And it's something that has been building up. Keep in mind, this is not about George and Trayvon. George and Trayvon, they're just a match. That fire we've been piling wood on that fire for decades.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Joe, and I think that's where I'm hoping this conversation remains, because the system needs to figure out what happened that night, and hopefully justice will prevail. Although people are questioning, the justice that has been handed so far to Trayvon.
This is the worst. Yeah, this is the worst place it could have happened for anyone under these conditions because of the history of the Sanford Police Department. Recent history.
So. Right. And so, again, I get your point of view. I appreciate it. And more than anything else, I just appreciate you coming in and having this conversation with me. So thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll talk.